Welcome back. After 17 months, here we are, finally back again. It's been kind of a busy 17 months, and I've had to focus on a bunch of different projects and family also, and we've actually moved since the last time I talked to you, but we're still in Texas here. And we've got that global pandemic going. There goes a Walmart truck probably on its way, full of toilet paper, I'm sure, heading for the Walmart here. And it actually looks pretty normal. I can see a few people bringing cases of water out. And the Applebee's, they're probably not doing too good. But that's how things look out this way, and overall, it's not too bad. It's a little bit encouraging. So hopefully we can get through these few months up ahead. We are going to be changing the format a little bit and try to take things back towards how they were during the first 2 years of the program. Our focus back then was more on the weather and less on the chat and the live stream, the connection problems, which were really plaguing us for a while, dropouts and stuff like that. So hopefully we're going to have less of these technical errors because I can just package up these files right after we record it and upload it to YouTube. And hopefully that'll give you a better experience. So I'm sorry we're not doing it live, but maybe we can still do that on busy weather days. But for our routine programs, we're going to be doing these pre-recorded about 30 minutes before they're posted. We always start with a top-down approach to the weather, and this is the first time I've really looked at the weather in detail. I've been pretty busy with data processing and programming. Here we have the 250 millibar chart. This is going to be up at about 34,000 feet, and that'll put us in the top of the troposphere. The solid lines correspond to height, which is basically pressure aloft. And then we have the dashed lines. Those are going to be ice attacks right here. See those dashed lines, and there's shading in them. That indicates wind speed. So this area of concentrated dashed lines and shading, that's a jet stream. That's a jet streak. I mean, the axis itself is the jet stream, but the jet streak is basically a jet max. It's an area of concentrated wind, band of very fast-moving wind, and it's concentrated right there, for example. And there's another band right there. That's a jet max, and that's running about 100 to 110 knots. And if we put that all together, there you go. I saved you some time. You didn't have to wait around for everything to be drawn. So we can see up in Canada, there's a jet max there. We can see up in Canada, we have the polar front jet extending from British Columbia to the Dakotas and out towards the Great Lakes area. That polar front jet is running about 110 knots. And then down to the south, we have a subtropical jet. And that's running about 120 to 130 knots. Highest speeds are in Kansas, around Dodge City there. And we can tell that's a subtropical jet because it's strongly anticyclonic. It's kind of paired up with the polar front jet. And so we get a coupling effect in the Great Plains. And this is also bringing up moisture from the subtropics. You can see in Arizona, they've got winds of about 100 to 120 knots coming up from the southwest, and that's bringing up moisture. And off the west coast, you can see a low pressure area. That's an upper level cutoff low. We tend to see those in the springtime, and those have historically been poorly forecast by the models. The LFM and NGM used to have a lot of trouble with those cutoff lows because they were kind of detached from the baroclinic environment up north. Not as much temperature contrast, and that makes it more difficult for the models. But today's models, they have much better handling of these systems, but they can still be a little bit unpredictable, and that's partly because of the data void down to the south. So we'll take a look at the satellite and see that picture of southwesterly flow. There it is. That's the visible imagery showing the cutoff low off the coast of California, and you can see it spinning there. Most of that cloud field there is cumuliform. It's a mixture of stratocumulus and some towering cumulus closer to the center. Off to the east, little plume of moisture associated with a subtropical jet, and that's kind of the Pineapple Express there. That can be a very important contributor to moisture on the west coast. When that heads into places like California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, that can really bring up the rainfall totals. This is a look at the water vapor imagery, and there you can really see the plume of moisture coming up through Baja California into Arizona. And another important feature is out to the west, an area of strong descent. The strong contrast between that strong descent and the moisture off to the east, that's an indicator of strong upper level winds. So you can actually use that to position the jet stream without even looking at upper level charts. And if you look in California, you can see part of the deformation zone up there north of the cold core low. A lot of moisture hanging around there in Southern California. And there it is in California. You can see a lot of anvil material. A lot of the higher moisture showing on the water vapor imagery is probably from that anvil and a lot of debris cloud in the mid and upper levels. That water vapor imagery is not very sensitive in the lower levels. So you don't want to really use that for forecasting, but that'll give you an idea where the mid and upper moisture, how it's being distributed across the area. So this is the California deserts and part of Nevada, showing a lot of shower activity there, especially right there around Needles and Lake Havasu City. And it looks like that'll be spreading up into Las Vegas in the next couple of hours. Elsewhere around the country, a beautiful day there in the Pacific Northwest. Off the west coast there, you can see a cold air advection pattern. There's cold air coming down across that cold current there, a little destabilization, and it's mostly under an inversion. So this is a lot of stratus and stratocumulus working southward. Very cool pattern there. In the northern plains, we've also got a cold air advection pattern. You can see a lot of cumulus and stratocumulus working southward, organized into streets parallel to the low-level winds. And some of those are developed into towering cumulus there around the Minnesota area, east of Minneapolis there. So a little bit of showery activity in that region. But down in the Denver area, we've got upslope working through there. You can see those bands of thick stratocumulus pushing westward into the Denver, Fort Collins, and Akron area. If this was late spring, we would probably be talking about thunderstorms, but there's just not enough moisture in that area. And out across the Rockies, we can see all that extensive snow cover from Wyoming down to Colorado. And if you take a look on the internet, put March 1st and blizzard and I-80 into YouTube, and you'll see some pretty amazing scenes here from about a week and a half ago. Just treacherous conditions there along Interstate 80. Here we have an elevation profile of Interstate 80 between Cheyenne and Salt Lake City. And this will give you some idea of how high the roads are through this area. You can see that they average about 6,000 to 7,000 feet, and some areas around Arlington get way up over 7,500. And the highest part of I-80 is just west of Cheyenne, where it reaches 8,640 feet near Happy Jack Road, exit 323. So, yeah, it can be pretty brutal there in the wintertime. Texas is under the influence of that subtropical jet. Lots of moisture coming in from the west, and conditions are mostly cloudy across much of Texas. You can see a little line of thunderstorms coming together there between southeast Missouri and southeast Oklahoma. You can see some really long sheared anvils in that area. And there's those storms in Arkansas. Very long anvils coming off of them, telling you that there's strong upper level winds coming out of the west-northwest. And out ahead of it, you can see the moisture field. A little bit of stratocumulus out around the Little Rock area. And there's the pivotal weather graphics. High resolution rapid refresh model. We'll try to pull up a sounding right there, let's say around Conway, Arkansas. And the sounding comes up. And we can see right there already the hazard type being generated by that sounding is marginal tornadic. And you can see the stretching there of the wind profile. The wind's near the surface, only about 10 knots out of the southwest. But as you go higher up into the troposphere, we get into 50, 60, 70 knot winds. And what's most critical is between 0 and 1 kilometer right there. See that right there? That's a very strong difference in winds. They go from southwesterly at 10 to west-southwest at about 30. And there's also this kind of stretching right there. This is telling us that at about 0.5 kilometers right there at the tip of that arrow, the winds are out of the southwest at about 26 knots. So if we plot that together, we get that U shape right there, that inverted U, that's indicating some very strong helicity in there. And that's what the storms are going to feed off of as they develop. The sounding here doesn't indicate that things are particularly unstable. I can kind of ballpark maybe 73, 64, and I think that's going to put us a little bit to the left of that white parcel line. And that's kind of a little sliver of instability, probably about 1,000 joules per kilogram. Yeah, and there's the cape right there. You can see it's not that big, only 600 to 1,200, depending on which parcel lift you use. And the significant tornado potential is not particularly that high. You can see this brown line just kind of cuts through part of the EF0 to non-tornadic spectrum, but we would have to keep an eye on this, and that would tell me we would have to be alert for any meso-low development there in Arkansas, anything that could back the winds. However, what we have here is this trough, which means the winds are going to be pretty much doing this kind of thing and nothing to really back the winds around in a really organized way. So I'm not too sure we're going to see much squeaking out of those cells this evening. SPC there going for a enhanced risk. They do have a watch box out covering much of Arkansas and southeastern Missouri, and another watch there in southern Kentucky. And if we go to the mesoscale discussion, we can kind of get an idea of what they were thinking. This discussion was out for just about 20 minutes ago, and you can see they're talking about supercells increasing in intensity. 21Z special sounding from Little Rock does not sample the plume well. As strong capping is evident at 850 millibars, but as I showed you, the observed shear does support supercell structures. But again, things are kind of marginal today. They are going to be fast moving for sure. You can see that the mean wind is pretty far off the center of the hodograph, 40 to 50 knots. So that right there tells you it's going to be moving about 30 to 40 knots at the very least. And the little screen of information at the bottom, going for right motion 280 at 36. And keep in mind that that's a right mover motion. If you go in between the right and the left, it kind of gives you the mean motion. So you're looking at 40 knots on those cells. So that's probably a good thing if you're in that area. The storms are just going to blow right on through, and that's going to give you kind of a very limited window. Elsewhere around the country, it is getting dark in the southeast U.S., but pretty good feed of moisture coming up from the south-southwest areas under southerly flow, and the Gulf is open. And then up in the northeastern U.S., we can see a lot of anvil debris coming from the Midwest, covering much of Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. And that's spreading into the northeast. And let me stop that loop so we can actually see the northeast. I know we have a few viewers up in that area, and things are kind of unsettled up there. But if we scroll this through, you can see there's a little bit of a southerly flow across that region. So the warm sector is kind of building into the area. And then we should see that area of disturbed weather approaching from the west overnight into tomorrow morning. And that brings us to the surface chart. So we've already got a very good picture of what's happening. So this will just kind of cement things together. Northern plains, you can see that northerly flow coming down. Winds out of the northwest at 15 to 20 knots there. And down in Texas and the southeastern U.S., like I said, the Gulf is open. You can see those southerly winds in that area. And The moisture axis runs about like that right there, extending from the Texas Gulf Coast up into northern Arkansas and right up into that area of storms. A very popular forecasting method back in the old days when we didn't have all these advanced models was to look at the intersection of the jet and the moisture axis, and that would kind of clue you into where the highest risk was. So that's the intersection there, the subtropical jet with the moisture axis, and we can kind of extend that up into the Ohio Valley, and we would be thinking about that area right there also. And then throwing all the fronts together, there's that polar front coming out of Canada. And one thing that we probably don't see very well on this chart, this is a centralized front product from the Weather Prediction Center, but there is a bit of a dry line in West Texas, like right in this area here. Yeah, there's the dry line right there from Big Spring down to San Angelo and down to Sanderson. I would be looking at probably a little bit of potential for severe weather. Well, maybe not severe weather. It depends on how much capping there is and how deep the moisture is. But down there around the Big Bend into the Edwards Plateau, that could be an area right there for thunderstorm development. So depending on how things go, if things aren't too capped, we could be looking at that region for a little bit of thunderstorm activity. But again, we'd have to look at the soundings and the upper level charts to see if that would actually pan out. One thing that's very important is this is March, and this is when we have a big severe weather season in the Del Rio area right there. Thunderstorms often get going orographically in the mountains of far northeastern Mexico, like right around there, and then they propagate, and we get some really big hailstorms this time of year that move out towards San Antonio. So that brings us to our forecast. There's tonight's chart, and we'll just draw the fronts on. You can see where everything is. That's a rough approximation where the fronts are. Strong, cold air coming in to the Midwest across Iowa and Missouri there. And things are getting unsettled out west. And there's that subtropical jet, Pineapple Express moisture coming up into Arizona and New Mexico, triggering some storms in that area. And out in southern Indiana, it looks like a little evidence of a small mesolow right there. So that could locally augment some of these storms right there in the Cincinnati and Dayton area. So that's something to keep an eye on. But the GFS is not much of a mesoscale model. It's not really optimized for this kind of thing. So moving ahead to tomorrow night, here's how things will look. So tomorrow things will move very quickly through the northeast U.S. By evening, things will be settled down to a northwesterly wind there in New York and New England. Big spider web low there in Quebec, 985 millibars, and this is all occluded. The cold front itself is going to run something like this. There it is. The departing cold front, and the tail end of it kind of dry there in the Carolinas. Things are coming together in Texas. Look at that southerly flow setting up. This is a combination of the cold ridge coming into the central U.S. with strong return flow in the high plains. So we get this kind of a lot of overrunning taking place in Texas. Some of that very rich moisture now being pulled up into places like Amarillo, Dodge City, and Oklahoma City, and all the way up into the Denver area. So some of it is transitioning over to snow when you get north of Springfield and Dodge City. Anywhere north of there, snow. We can kind of paint the edge of that front, something like that right there. And then let's run this up to Sunday, or to Saturday. This is Saturday evening. Looks like our focus shifts mostly up to the north. The boundaries look like this. Yeah, this is going to look good when I get my front painting tools all set up. But yeah, there you go. There's your MS Paint version of the fronts on Saturday night. A lot of upslope flow there in Nebraska, western South Dakota. And looks like a good weather system coming together in Wyoming. And up to the north there around the Billings area, very strong, blustery, northerly flow. Big 1046 millibar high moving into the area. So that's going to be probably on the verge of a blizzard, if not an actual blizzard there. along, I guess it's I-94, something like that. Sure what highway that is, but yeah, around Miles City down to the Billings area. Looks pretty rough there for Saturday evening. And looks like out in Nevada and California, a new system coming together. That's a Pacific system coming into Nevada, so that's going to be something to watch over the weekend. We'll run this up to Sunday. Looks like it's not quite coming together yet. In Texas, we've got kind of a backdoor front affecting the high plains right there, and not much change there in Nevada and Utah. So let's see what happens after that. Yeah, so for Monday night, not a whole lot of development there. Looks like our frontal system across the Rockies kind of dissipated. Big bubble high pressure area covering the central and high plains. Not much going on in the Intermountain region. That looks like kind of a bit of a tropical air mass in place. And looks like a new front coming on shore. There it is, Tuesday. Things look still very stormy. But you can see the thickness patterns, they start bunching up there in Arizona. So we've probably got a pattern kind of like that with the polar front jet coming in from the southwest. Some fast flow coming across the top of that cold dome, and that's probably generating some of these elevated storms in Texas. So these are probably not going to be anything worth chasing, although we'll keep an eye on it. This looks like maybe a little bit of a warm front feature right there. But the main weather maker, you can see that all that thickness packing coming into the Rockies, that tells me there's probably a front running something like that coming through Arizona and Utah. So again, this is Tuesday night. Let's see what happens Wednesday. Yeah, things get very stormy there in West Texas. It looks like this thing has cleared the Rockies just about. So there it is coming out in Mexico. Cold front approaching the Great Plains. Looks like we got strong southerly flow coming up. Gulf is open, bringing up lots of moisture. So yeah, this is probably going to be kind of a stormy period here Wednesday night going into Thursday. Up to the north, looks like we got a new outbreak of cold air. See that up here? Nice 1030 millibar high coming down. So that's probably going to blast through and spread a lot of cold air southward. So going into Wednesday night, there's that squall line rapidly moving across Texas and Oklahoma. Probably a little bit of severe weather potential with that. And then looks like we get a little bit of redevelopment, maybe along the dry line cold front merger during the middle of the day on Thursday. There it is. Looks like a dry line transitioning to a cold front. Possibly some severe weather potential along the north part of that cold front, maybe up to the warm front. So Kansas may be in a little bit of a predicament for Thursday. And up further to the northwest, looks like a bit of a winter weather situation there in western Nebraska and maybe Cheyenne. Another bad time to be on Interstate 80. Then moving forward overnight, looks like storms move into the Mississippi River Valley early Friday. Some winter weather potential spreading across the Great Lakes area. Very, very fast moving. Then for Friday night, looks like much of that's pushed up into the Great Lakes area. Let me give you the fronts real quick. Frontal systems kind of look like that to me. So you can see that there's a lot of tropical air spreading across the southeastern U.S. Good southerly flow in that region. And it is spreading over the frontal boundary in New York and New England and Ontario. So that's going to get, so we're going to see a little bit of an overrunning pattern, isentropic lift pattern in that area. So a little bit of potential there for freezing rain, sleet, and snow. And then going into the rest of the weekend, this is 8 or 9 days from now. Looks fairly seasonal, a little bit unsettled. We've still got westerly flow, a little bit of troughiness out to the west. So I think we're going to have more rain chances in Texas and Oklahoma. And then not a whole lot of change after that. Looks like more of a progression of cold fronts starting to move south out of Canada. So it looks like winter is not quite over. We'll see how that pans out, but it is going to be pretty active, and I think we'll have a lot of stuff to look at over the next couple weeks. So that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed the program. We'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get some of these bugs worked out and some better drawing tools in place. Have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.